And welcome back. We're now moving into our third and final topic for the morning. This one is actually about a conversation about agriculture in our country and how we intend to improve, how we intend to move things forward. Now, in to tell us more, we have Jose Alpuche, and he is actually, for this particular one, representing Elevate Consulting Limited. Wow. Mr. Alpuche, good morning, sir, and welcome.
Very pleasant good morning, John, and good morning, Marlene.
All right, so you know, agriculture is definitely very important, and I always think it should have been something that we talk about on a daily basis. This is simply about what we consume, how we could make it better for our country to be self-sustainable. Exactly where I'd like to start. When it comes to agriculture in our country, are we self-sustainable?
First and foremost, I think indeed you're right. The farmer, we consult him or her at least 3 times a day, and we don't consult any other professional in that respect. So yes, we are on the path to a sustainable agriculture framework in Belize. We're already, quite frankly, sustainable in a number of the basic commodities. Where we need to go is in increasing our value addition to ensure that excess production could be converted into shelf-stable, shelf-ready products that could bring in better returns to the farmers and to Belize as a whole.
You know, we're grateful that you're here to have this conversation with us. This is part of getting ready for elections, and I think in conversations that we hear from politicians, we're hearing agriculture, investment in agriculture, and different suggestions as to how we can use agriculture as a way to rebuild the economy. And this is perhaps at a frequency that we've never heard before. And so I wanted to be able to hear from you just in looking forward, understanding the economic situation that we're in. What are some of the things that we know about our agriculture sector today that are our weaknesses and opportunities that we really should be considering?
Marlene, I believe the COVID-19 crisis has actually reminded us of what we've been talking about quite a bit. Yeah. And that is that indeed a diversified economy is absolutely essential for the survival of small states such as Belize. Tourism collapsed, agriculture continued because at that point in time a continuity plan was devised. It's been continued to be one of the major source of income, but also to employment, and quite frankly showing the true socioeconomic benefit that agriculture provides to our people and to the economy. I think going forward though, we have to skip the platitudes and truly begin treating the sector not as an afterthought, but actually as a serious economic engine in the country. And quite frankly, a number of the challenges impacting the sector are outside of agriculture per se, agriculture and food production. Mm-hmm. And I believe one of the primary problem that we have in Belize right now, not only for the agriculture sector, but we've constructed an investment framework where we tend to favor the big guys. We will only get the full growth potential if we're able to put in place a system where everybody can truly compete. Let me explain a little bit. Over the years, and this is decades since independence, we've been putting in place fiscal incentives, export processing zones, and several other schemes designed more for the larger, in many instances, foreign investor, as opposed to our domestic investments and domestic investor. What this does is that it creates at least a two-speed economy. One, those that are benefiting from these incentives, and those that are not. And those that are not tend to be your micro, small, and medium enterprises, of which the farmers fall mainly into those in terms of micro, small, and medium enterprises. So they don't benefit from some of the same breaks that larger entities benefit from. And this is true throughout. I think we really need to rewrite the business environment to allow true growth, true competition, true growth at all levels, small, medium, and the large enterprises. And quite frankly, it's not to take away from those benefiting from the current fiscal incentives, but to extend most of the benefits to our micro, small, and medium investors. And why I say investors, I have been saying, and I continue to say, agriculture is and must be treated as a business. It cannot be treated as some social handout scheme to help people that are poor. Whether it's a milk farmer, whether it's a large investor, we have to recognize that they're in it to earn an honest living, and we have to design schemes that will allow them to do that, do it efficiently, and compete fairly.
That's an interesting perspective, because usually when we look at numbers related to agriculture, we're looking at their overall revenue that they may have earned the country, and by extension these large companies as well. But what we don't pay attention to is how much of that trickles down to the individual farmers and by extension their families. So what I'm hearing from you is kind of a rethink to make sure that we're more inclusive in looking at some of the smaller investors. Is that what you're saying?
A total rethink is required, a total redesign of our investment environment is required, and our business environment is required. As I say, what we have right now is an unlevel playing field where the small are actually not benefiting from the same regimes that the larger enterprises benefit from.
Jose, in the next year, until we can see what is going to happen with tourism, I know there's a lot of work happening to try to attract people back to Belize. It's just unknown. And that's the reason why a lot of people are, one, acknowledging what you said earlier, that we do need to move towards a more diversified economy. But also, when we hear all these promises and plans as to what can be done for agriculture and how this can be a part of rebuilding our economy moving forward, I'm sure you've been paying attention. Is there perhaps something that, given the experience that you've had, that we need to acknowledge beyond rethinking strategy? Are we looking at building upon the sector as it exists? Should we be looking at value added, as we've talked about before, value added products? Should we be venturing into manufacturing? Or should we be looking at small niche markets as to what we can offer?
We need to look at perfecting all that you have outlined. And quite frankly, as I say, the first thing is to correct the business environment, but then we also have some issues beyond our control, such as climate change, where we need additional investments to mitigate climate, the risk associated with climate change. Government has been doing a bit on that. It is a start, but there's still quite a bit more to do. There needs to be direct emphasis, though, as you put it, on the industrialization of food production. Now, I know maybe I shouldn't use the word industrialization, because then it
sounds big.
Envisages it connotes the industrial farms. That is not what I'm suggesting. It's more the manufacturing side, to move from agriculture to food production. That is one of the reasons why, quite frankly, the ministry was renamed from agriculture to food and agriculture, so that we begin looking at the value addition more keenly. And that is an area where quite a bit of investment has to go in, both within the public sector, but also within the private sector. But this is, as I say, where we need the proper business environment to facilitate those investments at all levels. I think one of the areas that I am absolutely impressed from the COVID challenge is the amount of food, especially prepared food, being provided to the public, and the ingenuity of a lot of small operators, mom and pop, that have actually come out due to the pandemic, and quite frankly, the quality is exceptional.
Yeah.
We have to capture that. We have to build on that at that level, but as I said, also at the higher level, whether it's to invest in soy oil refining, whether it's to invest in a new, as you're showing images of cattle in a beef plant for export of finished product. Yeah. The idea to take finished product, to take the primary production to finished product is absolutely key going forward.
Yeah, because we'll earn more bang for a buck. You earn more selling the finished product than you do the raw material. But what's been our hindrance, though? I mean, what do we? I mean, when I hear a politician saying something, what do I need to be paying attention to as to how we can overcome that barrier as to why we still are providing great quality raw materials for others to refine and make even more money off?
But as I said, it's the business environment, the investment environment that needs to be corrected.
Yeah.
We have literally hundreds of millions of dollars of deposits in our bank, in our banking system. That's Belizean money sitting in our banking system, virtually earning no interest right now. Yeah. But there is obviously a question of confidence in terms of investing in some of the areas. There's a need for additional technical help, but I believe that if we can correct and ensure that your small operator is able to import inputs for production duty free, and even produce in an environment where they are taxed on success, on output, not on inputs, and that is a problem right now. Yeah. You have the large operators operating; they operate in a tax-free environment, while the small operators have to carry the full tax burden. Yeah. Yeah. We need to change that, where once you're in manufacturing, once you're in production, move all the inputs, all the inputs for production, all the factors of production into as tax-free an environment as possible, and then you tax based on success, based on actual production. Yeah. This is particularly necessary for the agriculture sector. You know, you plant corn right now. If it doesn't rain, you lose everything. Yeah. The only person that benefits when there's a crop loss or any duties that you have paid to get that production to that level, while the farmer is stuck with a bank loan that he still has to pay and no income to pay. Yeah. We really need a rethink, and rethinking the business environment is absolutely key to the success, as I say, of agriculture, and food production, but any other sector, especially in manufacturing.
You know, a level playing field is what everybody would like to see. I think what you've just mentioned a while ago would be the conversation that is being had between those who are at the top of the chain and those who actually make the implementation methods for them to eventually evade some of these taxes. But that's neither here nor there. But as Elevate Consulting Limited, Jose, where, in terms of crops, where do you see us, at what point actually would you see us having agriculture be the lead to our income for our country rather than tourism? We were there once.
I don't think it's a question of being attempting to get to first place. Mm-hmm. I think it's a question of ensuring that what we're doing is viable and sustainable. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, I must take my hat off to a lot of the farmers who are actually have improved considerably and are quite competitive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I keep on saying we have to treat agriculture as a business. What is produced must be produced of a consistent quality, mm-hmm. At a competitive price, and with continuous supply. Otherwise, you're nowhere in the market.
Yeah.
And that is where we need to produce. I know some of the vegetables. Vegetables, for example, has always been one of the problem areas because there's imports, but imports are required. Are required because we need to import at certain time of the year to supplement domestic
supply
production.
And demand. Yes.
When domestic production goes down. And yes, we can extend periods, but then it becomes very costly and you're no longer competitive. So it's a balance that you have to hit. The challenge that we have in terms of another policy area that needs rethink is our food import policy. And it's not so much for fresh vegetables, but it's more for finished products and non-traditionals. Do you realize we're importing catfish from Vietnam and selling it in the stores as pasta?
Yes, I have heard this from the fisheries department maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, and I'll tell you, it's very difficult for me to buy fish if it's not directly from the fish market now, because we don't have enough to provide for the local market.
It's not necessarily that. I mean, that's why I said we need to look at an import policy that makes sense, but we can't be promoting increased tilapia production, etc., and then undermining it with imports. And I will tell you, when we were doing some review earlier this year, what is recorded as imports and what is actually imported is two different things. And that is where I say we need a revised import policy to allow growth here in Belize also.
If we look at opportunities that come out from this year, there's one thing that I have thought about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. This is perhaps the one period of time we'll have the truest knowledge of what our domestic demand is, because given the example of fish, fish is most typically sent out to some of the tourist areas as first preference, better price, and many different reasons. That's just where the bigger demand is. We saw what happened with the chicken producers, where they had a surplus and then eventually couldn't supply the demand. So is this perhaps a good time that we'll be able to know what the Belizean market requires?
Marlene, there's a factor that caught all of us off guard. And quite frankly, neither within government or the private sector, we had taken it fully on board. But when we started looking at the chicken, and I'll use chicken as an example, when we started looking at the roller coaster demand and supply for chicken over the last few months, while we had taken on board the quantity lost to tourism, what we did not factor in was the actual impact of the closure of our land borders. We started doing some investigations, and I think for last year, there were, I think it's close to 1.3 million exits through the northern border, and that's both to Chetumal and to the free zone. But when we started doing some some rough estimation, you're talking anywhere from $180 to $200 million being spent in Mexico annually, far higher than what anybody expected. And this 1.3 is actually a domestic figure, figures produced by our own authorities. And we saw the phenomenon too of where up north, you question the business people, any sector, and Corozal and Orange Walk started outperforming other areas of the country because people are not going across the border. So it's been...
Or contraband has been more difficult to get as well.
Contraband is a part of it, yes, I agree. But I think when you look at 1.3 million exits through the northern border, it says a lot.
And that's annual.
And as I say, when you extrapolate those numbers with cost control, talking about a sizable amount of income going out, of resources going out of the country into neighboring Mexico.
Yeah.
So we need a rethink. This needs, quite frankly, far more careful study, because as the border reopens, demand may very well shift again into Mexico, away from local production.
Yeah.
What had shown in COVID, though, is that we do need to invest more in buffer stocks. Because while we had stocks to carry us through, the demand for exports, we had difficulty meeting some of them, simply because government took, and quite frankly, I believe the right decision, to ensure that we have domestic supply for our people first, and then we export what was residual. Now that is an extraordinary event, but it also shows where we have to invest more in maintaining buffer stocks in the country.
Yeah.
Now, what about opportunities that exist? Things that you see Belize with the right environment, with the right interest, that we can really take advantage of? I mean, are we solely focusing on our main agricultural products and missing opportunities that may exist?
As I say, there's always room for improvement. There's a lot of room for improvement in production of juices and so from existing product. Mango being an immediate example. But that requires private sector investment. The value addition element of it, we're working with some of the people we're working with right now, attempting to do our first poultry exports into the Caribbean. We're hoping that can be combined with beef exports, and I mean cut carcasses, not live.
Just wait.
But we're waiting some regulatory clearance from government in that respect. So there's a drive to go up the value chain, and that is one of the areas where we will need to push more focus. It will require a bit more investment. It will require a lot more dialogue within the private sector to agree on some of the priority areas for investments.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, these are the conversations that we must continue to have, Jose, because we know how important agriculture is to our country. At times we do take it for granted, but especially when it comes to high value crops, your sweet pepper, your onion, and these things are actually, you could actually grow them in your backyard. They're right there, readily available for you. And we do hope that we could get you again back for another conversation. You've got something else?
Yeah, I think one of the things we didn't cover was the preparation. You talked about buffer storage, but what about preparation for external threats? We know, as you noted earlier, climate change is something that we're already dealing with. Thankfully, we haven't been talking so much about a drought this year as we did last year, and there's always the threat of a storm coming in and wreaking havoc on the sector. What about preparation or mitigation, I should say, of climate change effects and other natural disasters?
Excellent question, Marlene. That's one of the things I was working on, last things I was working on before I exited government, and that had to do with a World Bank loan. I know that the work is continuing to obtain, it was a target of $25 million US to invest specifically in climate, smart agriculture and the climate adaptation and mitigation. That 25 million, quite frankly, is probably a quarter or an eighth of what we will need to truly get the sector up and running.
Wow.
There's a lot of investment that is required, but it is necessary investment to ensure not only that we mitigate the threat from climate change. There's issues such as establishment of a disaster recovery fund, and quite a bit of work in digitization so that the sector can be more efficient in what it uses. But those investments can also help with the greening of agriculture, making it more environmentally sustainable. So it's an area where, while the work has started, there's tremendous need for additional resources to be put in place for us to have the sector as secure as it should be.
Okay. All right.
Well, again, it was an excellent conversation, and we do hope we could have you back again to continue, because it is important, agriculture in our country, and how we could become even more sustainable from that standpoint. Jose, thank you so very much, and here's to wishing you all the very best.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and indeed, I look forward to coming back, and you guys have a great day. Thank you.
All right. Stay safe.
There you go.
You too.
We're about to take our final commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be wrapping things up. Stay with us. We'll be right back.